My guest tonight is a Tony and Obie award-winning actor who is in The Stand and Of Mice and Men. He can currently be seen in Forrest Gump, the film that's coined the phrase, "Stupid is as stupid does." Not to be confused with my personal license plate, I as stupid as you. Ladies and gentlemen, Gary Sinise.
Thank you. What is that, like the Hall of Death or something that you have to walk down?
Yes, we call that the Hall of Death.
The Hall of the Lost Talk Show Host.
We've lost a few down the hallway. I think after tonight's opening remarks, I may head down there on the way out. Loved you in Forrest Gump. You were just terrific in that. Lieutenant Dan, right? Let's go ahead and make absolutely sure about this leg situation, though. Morris, if you could, please, just get a nice shot. Let's make... How exactly did they... it was just amazing, the special effects in the film. Was it a hugely complicated process in terms of removing those for the majority of the picture? Or did they just have them tied up underneath you, which is what I thought they had done?
No. Remember Toulouse-Lautrec, the movie that Jose Ferrer did, where he had very short legs? Well, they tied his legs up the whole time behind him. The only time that we did that, there was only one scene where I actually had to do that. But most of the time, I'm in a wheelchair. We had a specially designed wheelchair that I sat in. And then the rest of the time, when I'm actually lifted out of the chair or fall down on the floor or something, we had these long blue screen socks on my legs so that they could then go back later on with a computer and erase my legs. And that's what they did. Yeah.
Little booties is what they were.
Little booties, yeah.
So this movie is it's taken off, though. I mean, how does it feel? I mean, you with The Stand, obviously, seen by probably 80 million people. In this movie, I mean, you've become, in a very short time, in spite of the years and years of work you've been doing on stage, pretty much a household name.
Yeah. I've got the guard dogs now, I know. It's amazing how a couple of roles and a couple of projects can all of a sudden change your level of visibility, the kind of work, you know, all of a sudden draw attention to the work that you've done years before and things. I'm just glad that I'm a part of this film because I think it's a beautiful film. I think Tom is just spectacular in it. He's just great and great to work with. Beautifully made by Bob Zemeckis, and I'm just lucky to be a part of it.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me is it doesn't really follow any of the typical formulas that you find in films. There's not an antagonist. It's not really good guy versus bad guy.
No, it's a life story, and that's one of the things that I think people are responding to it so well is that it's constantly taking you someplace else. You can't predict where this movie is going at all, but it's held together by a central character that we really grow to feel protective for. Forrest Gump. Tom is so endearing from the first moments that we want to watch him, and he just keeps taking us in places that we could have never dreamed about.
When you read the script, did it read like something? I imagine you had to use quite a bit of imagination when you sat down and decided whether or not this is something you're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, when I first read the script, there were all kinds of things in it that didn't end up in the movie. One thing that was kind of scary in a way was a lot of the characters, you got to see what was in their heads by having little cartoon clouds come over their heads, and then you'd see what their thought was at that moment.
Don't recall that particular scene from the film.
Thank God he cut it out. He cut all that stuff out. We didn't even shoot that, but Lieutenant Dan always had the black cloud, floating over his head.
Well, if you haven't seen the movie, here's a quick scene at the boat dock. This is after Sergeant Dan has lost his legs.
Lieutenant Dan.
Sorry, Gary. Take a quick look. Forrest Gump.
I told you if you were ever a shrimp boat captain, that I'd be your first mate. Well, here I am. I am a man of my word.
Okay.
Yeah, but don't you be thinking that I'm gonna be calling you sir.
No, sir. It's my boat.
Had you and Tom worked together before this?
No, I hadn't worked with Tom ever. I had met Tom one time. I was doing The Grapes of Wrath as a play. It was done down in La Jolla. And then we eventually went to Broadway. When we were in La Jolla, Tom came backstage, introduced himself because he liked the show. And that's the only time we'd met until we ended up in South Carolina, started working on...
And you would say you hit it off pretty well together, I guess?
I'd say.
Yes.
Yeah,
In fact, you're working together, I guess, on what, Apollo 13?
Yeah, it's a new movie that we start next month. It's amazing how movies just start to happen, you know,
Yeah.
at a certain point.
I wouldn't know anything about that in my career, but I mean, I get the idea.
But I've been on these shows before where they say, well, what are you doing next? And you just kind of go like this, you know, because nothing. I'm glad I can say that I'm doing Apollo 13.
And this is based on, don't tell me, Apollo 13. Well, what is the particular story they're going to focus on here?
The Apollo 13, the story
Okay,
of it.
so what you're saying is that Apollo 13 will, in fact, be about Apollo 13.
Yeah, and the men that went up in Apollo 13. Yeah.
Fascinating.
It's...
No, actually, there was something that went wrong, terribly wrong on that particular journey.
That's what you're getting at.
Yes.
What happened on
Yes.
Apollo 13? Well, this was the third moon shot. There were, believe it or not, there were 6 times we went to the moon. There were 12 guys that walked on the moon. This was the third shot because Apollo 11 was first, and then Apollo 12 was second, Apollo 13. But an oxygen tank.
Why did they do that, by the way, now that I think about that?
Why did they do that?
Why not start on 1?
Well, 1 was a horrible tragedy.
2?
Well, 2 was unmanned.
3?
Well, unmanned.
Let's pick it up at 13. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
You want me to
digress.
take you to the program? I'll take you through the program. Apollo 13, they were about halfway on their way to the moon, and an oxygen tank blew up in the service module, and they lost all their electrical power. So they couldn't fire their engines. They only had a little bit of power. They had to spend a lot of their time in the lunar module because the command module had no power at all, and so we had, for 5 days, we had to figure out how to get these guys back from space. Otherwise, they would just end up zipping off into eternity. And we used the moon as a slingshot and just flung them back toward Earth.
It's an amazing story,
And
it really is.
it's a fabulous story, and Tom plays Jim Lovell, who wrote the book that this is based on.
All right, we'll do a quick break. Be right back with Gary Sinise.
I get to tend the rabbits.
Yeah, you get to tend the rabbits. When it rains in the winter, we just say hell was going to work, and we'll just build a fire in the stove, and we'll just sit there, and we'll listen to the rain.
In 1992, that is of Mice and Men. We're back down the hallway of death with Gary Sinise. You produced, directed, and co-starred this picture, and you hadn't had a lot of major feature work at this time. How did you land this particular deal?
Well, I had founded a theater in Chicago, Steppenwolf Theater, and oh, all right.
There's Mrs. Steppenwolf right over there.
Mom, you said you wouldn't do that. And we developed the play of The Grapes of Wrath. We developed a play out of the novel. We went to Broadway, and during that time, I became very close with Elaine Steinbeck, Steinbeck's widow, and she gave me the right one day. I just said...
She was very protective with the rights, too, wasn't she?
She has the rights to a lot of his things, yeah,
Right.
and she's very protective, but we did do a good job with The Grapes of Wrath, so she felt she was in good hands, and I asked her one day if she'd give me the rights. She said, well, honey, it's already been a film. Because this is a Texas woman, she's fabulous. And
she was right.
And she was right. Been a film twice, actually.
Right.
But
What,
1939, and then 1980, I believe, Randy Quaid and Robert Blake did it as a television movie. And but that was not intimidating, and I said, it's a story worth telling again, so let's do it.
Right.
That's how it worked out.
And Ernest. I think Ernest did one version, too, right? What about John Malkovich?
He keeps doing the version.
He just over and over again. Well, John Malkovich, do you? I know you two were friends because you had actually worked with him in this theater group that you mentioned. Do you keep in touch?
Yeah, I see John from time to time. He's on the road a lot. He's working a lot of the time. We stay in touch. He just directed a play at Steppenwolf, and I went in and saw the play and spent some time with him there. But
So you're still actively involved with the theater down there?
Yes, yeah. You know, I'm on an advisory level. I don't work there nearly as much as I used to on a day-to-day basis because I'm trying to do something else right now.
Well, they told me at one point that, and I don't know if it figures in after the theater group or before, but you had some band activity going on, and you were the Mick Jagger of Chicago.
Well, of my high school, anyway. Yeah,
well, to me, no, please.
Yeah, no, I wanted to, I think I always just wanted to be a performer. From the time I was in 4th grade, I had a guitar, and I used to lip sync to records and pretend I was in a band and all that. And so,
it sounds like quite an act you had there.
yeah. Milli Vanilli.
Did you, were you ever seriously producing it, Millie?
No, well, we had a pretty good band, I thought. We had a band called Half Day Road. It was my...
Dude!
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Right on!
yeah, it was a road in my hometown. We named it after the street. It was just a favorite street, and we named it after that. And we used to play around Illinois. And I never made it to Indiana.
Yeah,
but,
I'm sorry. We looked for you in Logansport. Was it easy listening, or what kind of tunes were you pursuing exactly?
Easy listening. No, we did a lot
You know, the Hall of Death, they play at Easy Listening.
I better go back into the Hall of Death. We did a lot of Stones and Who and Led Zeppelin and, you know, that Blood Rock and Grand Funk and, you know, that kind of thing.
We're going to do one more break here. We'll be right back with Gary Sinise and, of course, The Later Letter, and so much more back after this. With Gary Sinise. My guest Monday night is Richard Simmons here on the big... by the way, where does Sinise, what is that?
That's Italian.
From? It is?
Sinise.
The Steppenwolf family and the Italians are in the crowd tonight here. You know, we were talking actually earlier, we don't have a lot of time, but I understand that amidst the acting and amidst the rock band thing that you were grooving out on, that you were not actually a good kid, that you had kind of a rough side to you as a child.
I was a terrible student.
That's what I was looking
for. That's what you're talking about. Yeah, I was until I found the theater. But I just never got good grades. I just couldn't. I was always the kid that was looking out the window or just kind of like this all the time.
Were you a hellion? Were you a hellraiser? Or were you just not necessarily...
Yeah, my parents moved a little bit when I was a teenager, like from the time I was 12 to the time I was 15.
I had that same thing.
And, you know, you're moving around, and that's when you're really establishing your peer group and your friends, and it was very disorienting a little bit, so I had a lot of trouble adjusting. But I found the theater, and I started making friends and started spending a lot of time in the theater and did my first play when I was 16.
And now you get to answer a later letter. Finally, there's a payoff to it all.
Great. Okay,
this is a letter written to you by the previous night's guest, which was Julia Sweeney was on here last night. Are you familiar with the Pat character on Saturday Night Live?
Well, sure.
Gary, am I correct in assuming that you did the stand before you shot Forrest Gump? Love ya, Julia Sweeney.
Yes.
Some of these letters don't really have long answers, do they? We'll see you Monday night, folks, with Richard Simmons. Thanks, Gary. It's a pleasure. Gary Sinise, folks. Good night.